Hello and welcome to You and the Law. I'm Mike Monta, your producer and host for tonight's program. And we're going to be talking about comparison of legal systems tonight, and a very interesting program and a very interesting career development for our expert guest on this, who is Aldan D. Gabel, an attorney in the Dayton-Montgomery County area. Who will tell you more about it later. But in the early 2000s, he practiced in two countries in Europe and Asia, Azerbaijan and Macedonia, not the Greek Macedonia, but the actual Macedonia. And we'll be talking about his experiences there and discussion of their systems and how they might compare to us, and we'll go from there. Before we get to questions and discussion, let me remind you that You and the Law is a monthly presentation produced here at the studios of the Dayton Access Television. DATV is on Time Warner, it's Channel 5, and it's the public access channel of Time Warner Cable Network in Dayton, Ohio. Program's also cablecast north and south on the public access channel, Channel 6, on the Continental Cable Network through the auspices of the Miami Valley Cable Council. Executive producer for the program is former domestic relations judge Mike Brigner. We are live tonight, and this is a call-in show, so if there is anything about this topic that interests you, please call in, and Aldan Gabel will attempt to answer. And in fact, he will answer, he won't just attempt to. As you see on the TV screen, our number is 223-5311. We also stream live at DATV.org, so if you're not within our viewing area, you can still watch the program at DATV.org, and hopefully some of you are doing that. So, enough said about that. Well, let me tell you something else here. We didn't used to have a sponsor on this, but we do now, and we have for the past few years, and it's the Dayton Bar Association. Whose director is Bill Wheeler, and we'll talk a little bit about the Dayton Bar Association as the program goes on. But let me turn to Al, and welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about your career, where it started, and then we'll get into Azerbaijan and Macedonia.
Well, first, Mike, let me say thank you for the opportunity to be here, and also the Dayton Bar Association. I'll start at the beginning. I'm a native from Portsmouth, Ohio. Went to PHS, graduated from there, went to University of Cincinnati, got both my master's and my bachelor's, and then I ended up in Georgia Tech with another master's, and ultimately ended up at UD, where I received my law degree. I've always had an interest in the law. I look back when I was 10 years old and going to the public library, and there was two types of books I was interested in. One was baseball, the other was law. And particularly the one I really fell in love with was the biography and autobiography of Clarence Darrow. I always wanted to grow up to be like Clarence Darrow. I found him to be the supporter of the underclass and the poor, and so forth. Of course, I read more books and found that wasn't exactly true, but he did symbolize, for many, the opportunity to help those who needed help. As I mentioned, I went to Georgia Tech in a master's program. I had the opportunity to, about 2005, I applied, maybe 2004, I applied for a position in Azerbaijan with the American Bar Association. And I was accepted, but unfortunately my mother, my dear mother, was ill, and in consultations with my two sisters, we decided it would be best not to leave Mom. So I did not go, I declined. Mom died a few years later, and after that I reapplied and got accepted and went to Azerbaijan. I was there from 2007 until 2009, approximately 2 years. And I left there, came back to Dayton for approximately 10 months, I had a big manslaughter case that I had to finish, and I got a call prior to that trial asking me if I'd be interested in coming to Macedonia, not to work with the American Bar Association, but work on the Department of Justice program as a consultant. After consulting with family, I decided why not. I thought it sounded like a great opportunity to get to know another part of the world, which I didn't anticipate I would ever get to. So I went to Macedonia, lived in the beautiful capital of Skopje, and made many friends and worked with the embassy with an office at the Ministry of Maternal Affairs.
Well, it's interesting that you were interested in baseball also, because today's opening day, at least for the Reds. I think the Cubs and the Cardinals were on yesterday. So tell us a little bit about, now, you graduated in, I think, 83, was it? 1983, which was the 100th anniversary of the Bar Association.
Mm-hmm.
So your career has been mostly in criminal law, has it not?
Most of my career has been primarily in criminal law. I've done some DUIs. In fact, I was on this show a number of years ago on DUIs. I also do some domestic relations, divorces, and so forth, and juvenile. I do a lot of juvenile work. I work with young people, but primarily my emphasis and what I do mostly is in criminal defense work.
Mm-hmm. And what was your interest in, and who did you contact to sponsor you for a trip to Azerbaijan?
No one actually sponsored me per se. It was through the American Bar Association, and it was considered a volunteer job. Also, there were expenses paid, which was generous for that part of the world. You know, people live over there, and they live on $100 to $200 a month. And I'm talking about police officers and others. The salary is ridiculously low. So I got an expense check every month, $1,800. Compared to the natives there, I was a rich man. I didn't get a salary per se, but didn't need a salary per se. I had a car. I had a driver furnished to me if I needed to go anywhere business-wise. They would take me. Wonderful people. Azeris are good people. I will mention to you eventually that they're having a tough time right now with repression of their free speech. They're trying to have free speech there, and they're having difficulty in doing it.
I think we have a map of the Azerbaijan area. Let's see if our staff can pull that up and put it on the screen. Here we go. Maybe describe a little bit about where that is, Al, and some of the countries nearby, and where you were located.
I'd be glad to do that. Azerbaijan, of course, is kind of the middle of that map, and it's in big letters, Azerbaiján. On the, what would be on their east side would be the Caspian Sea. It goes right up to the Caspian. So as you see, all the blue is the Caspian Sea. The Caspian Sea is important because it has a wealth of oil. Oil used to come from inland, but they exhausted it, primarily the Russians years ago. So they found new oil fields out in the Caspian Sea, and that oil is actually piped from the Caspian Sea all the way through the country of Azerbaijan, down through Georgia, and ultimately goes to Turkey and put in those big, huge oil tankers. Azerbaijan is very important. It's a tremendous revenue for the government. Unfortunately, much of it is corrupt, but the bottom line is they make a lot of money from the oil.
Okay, now where that is that, and that used to be part of the Soviet Union, did it not?
Yes, actually prior to the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was a part of the Soviet Union, and when it collapsed, the head of the KGB for the Soviet Union, who was from Azerbaijan, became the president of Azerbaijan, and now his son is the president, and it's quite frankly a one-family dominated government. They do have a parliament, but the parliament answers directly to the president. They very, very rarely ever have a real election, and the president's always elected by 80 or 90% of the vote.
And now nearby that, to the south, I believe, is Iran, and to its west is Armenia. And as we were talking before the show, this is a country which is, what, 95% Muslim? And so how are they getting along with their neighbors? north and or south and west.
The neighbors in Iran, I think they tolerate the Azeris. They do get upset. Several years ago, apparently the Israelis signed some type of lease agreement with Azerbaijan, and the Iranians were very upset and threatened to overthrow the government. Did not do so, and I believe the bases are there in Azerbaijan unless they've taken them out recently. The Armenia country is a thorn in the side, depending on which side you look at, thorn at each other's side between Azerbaijan and Armenia. They are mortal enemies. They shoot back and forth. Fortunately, not too many people get hit or get killed, but there is a hot, contested reason for that. There's some land there. If you see the green land towards the middle, that used to be part of Azerbaijan, and the Armenians took it over, claiming that the people living there wanted it to be Armenian, and therefore they claimed they had a right to take it, and they took it.
Okay.
If you go to Armenia is allied with the Russians. They have been for many years. They still are a part of the Russian allies in that area, while Azerbaijan is an ally of the United States. On the other side of Armenia is Turkey. Turkey, of course, is a big power in that area. Turkeys and Armenians don't get along either. And in fact, if you know a little bit of history, the Armenians claimed that the Turkeys back in 1918 or whatever it was, killed millions of their people or thousands of their people and lined up the skulls, which you've seen pictures of. And that becomes an issue in this country between the Armenian population and between the Turkish population.
All right. Now, tell me the thought process you went through in it's basically a career change, although you're back with us now. Picking this country out of many others to practice, and what did you believe you wanted to do there?
Well, let's go back to the founding of the program in Azerbaijan. Prior to the date I went there, which I believe was 2001, the late, or excuse me, I apologize, she may still be with us, I hope so, Justice O'Connell and others formed a committee to try to anticipate how best they could deal with the former countries of the Soviet Union.
Okay.
They were concerned to be chaos, that they would fall to unscrupulous governments, for instance, the Iranians and others. So they established this program at the American Bar Association, which is out of Washington, D.C. I went there for orientation, and our purpose primarily was to help the governments establish some stability in their systems. And we did that. We did, I'm not saying it cured everything, but we did work with those we could. That includes defense lawyers, as much as I could. It also includes prosecutors, and it included, and quite frankly, I did a lot with the judges.
Now, was there coordination then between our government and the Azeri government?
I believe there was coordination. I met with several times, both the guy I worked with and myself. We met with the ambassador, Ann Dirtz, and Ms. Dirtz was very supportive. But she had to walk a fine rope because obviously there's concerns even back then about human rights violation. On the other hand, Azerbaijan has lots of oil, and also it's a stabilizing force against the Iranians, even back then. So she had to walk a tightrope.
So it's probably because of the oil. It's an ally we wanted, trade-wise, but maybe had some deficiencies in human rights that we felt might need to be addressed.
Well, we did, and that was a constant tension between those who said we support the Azeris no matter what versus those says no, we have to make sure they have human rights, allow their people to practice and to have fair governments and share some of the billions of dollars with the people rather than the leaders taking all the money. So there's a tension there, and Ms. Dirtz, who was a fabulous ambassador, had to play both sides as much as she could.
I'm thinking that when it was part of the Soviet Union before that dissolved in 1991, the status of human rights was probably fairly low.
Yes, because again, it was dictated by the Soviet Union, and they're not considered champions of human rights. That's true. And the guy who took over was the previous KBG, so obviously he was not a champion. Although I have to tell you, when I first arrived in Baku and flew in and they picked me up, I flew by myself to Baku and I arrived. I saw these billboards, huge billboards, of signs of a gentleman who looked like a grandfather type. And I thought, who is this gentleman? He must be the president. He's everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I later found out he's the president, that current president at the time. His father had died. The people, even though they didn't get to enjoy their freedoms, worshipped their president, first president, as if he was George Washington to them. Mm-hmm. I found that somewhat ironic, but he brought to them what they considered freedom from the Russians. The Russians have a history of going in there once in a while and invading, and this time they were gone.
What similarities does it have to, say, the Crimea and Ukraine in this day and age?
Well,
I know it was 10 years or more.
I don't know if I could really tell you much. I do know this from my brief studies of Russian, is that the closer you get to the motherland, the more sensitive they are. Mm-hmm. And the Crimean is right there. And some ways I consider Putin's offensive to be one to protect the motherland by a country on the border. On the other hand, they've also proven themselves with the Soviet Union, when they built that, of going much further. So, and Azerbaijan is physically far away that I don't believe Azerbaijan is threatened at this point.
Okay. We're going to take a short break. We're about 20 minutes into the program to let you know that you're watching You and the Law. We're talking with Aldan Gabel, an attorney in the Dayton-Montgomery County area, and we are talking about his sojourns to Azerbaijan, and we'll talk a little bit about when he went to Macedonia, and a comparison of their systems and ours, and those also. We are coming to you live and in color. Tonight is the NCAA championship basketball game, but it isn't on for a couple hours, so if you are watching us, don't change the station and think you're going to miss some of the basketball. You see our number up there is 223-5311. If you do have a question about this, please give us a call and share your wisdom with us. As I told you before, we're sponsored by the Dayton Bar Association, which has been serving our community since 1883, which makes it 132 years. Yeah, okay. And provides some services for the benefit of our Montgomery County citizens. We've got a lawyer referral service. If you don't have a lawyer, you can call 222-6102 and they'll help you out in finding one. A notary public service, if you want to become a notary, you could apply and be tested for that. A lot of companies need notaries, and it could be a future in your career. The Wills for Heroes program is fairly new, and volunteer members create wills for emergency first responders, firefighters, police, and EMTs. It's a great program, and it gets you started in the right direction with that. Public service committees, we have community service projects. Our website is www.daybar.org. Volunteer Lawyers Project is one of the programs serving the disadvantaged and founded and supported by members of the Dayton Bar. If I've left something out, Bill Wheeler, if you're watching, call me and let me know. Speakers Bureau also. Have you ever given a speech for the bar or anything like that? Members volunteer to speak at service clubs and community events on a variety of legal topics, and you've probably given some talks on this Azerbaijan.
I have.
And if you haven't, they'll probably call you.
Good.
So we appreciate the bar sponsoring us, and it's great for its members and the community. So let's get back and talk a little bit more about what was going on in Azerbaijan when you arrived in Baku? And what is the first thing that they had you do, and how did your career there progress?
Well, the first thing they had me do is get settled. I got picked up by who to be my assistant, Maher, a wonderful guy who at some point left to pursue other international lawyer skills. But I eventually got into the office. You know, it's funny, I expected, because I'm spoiled, I expected when I got there that I would have a secretary, I have a separate computer.
And you didn't.
I didn't have any of those things. I thought it'd be a separate office. There was a desk, there was a computer, old one, and Maher was next to me in his desk, in his computer. And I remember sitting down and saying, Maher, where's our secretary? And he laughed and said, we don't have secretaries. So I learned how to use the computer real quick. Even though my secretary back here, Miss Super, had warned me to learn, I put it off, so I was forced to learn it. I had a good director, Mr. Hespy, who lives in California now, and we tried to do as much as we can. I met Mr. Timothy Falk, who was the person I worked for in Macedonia a couple years later, and we tried to work with the young lawyers. I tried to work with the collegium. Let me take a minute to explain the collegium. Collegium is a Russian word. It's pretty similar to the word bar association. And the collegium was run by a short, bald head, nothing against short, bald head people, but this guy was a typical bureaucrat by the looks. And by substance, he was more of a bureaucrat than I was fearful of. He refused to change anything. He was basically a stool pigeon for the government. And anybody who tried to get through the bar association by passing the bar exam could not if they didn't keep him happy. I saw this in my own eyes, and so did the other international organizations, and most of them gave up on this guy, realizing that in all likelihood we'll never change the bar association collegium until someday he's gone and they change their ways. So as a result, I started working very closely with judges and prosecutors. They were a lot more progressive. I saw the judges' interview questions on their entrance. They were 15 minutes each. They were same questions. It was relevant questions. It made sense. So much different than with the defense bar. As a result, the defense bar is weak because those who become lawyers in the defense bar are not strong personalities. And to have an effective...
Is that purposeful?
Absolutely purposeful. And to have a strong defense bar, in my opinion, and Mike does defense work too, is to me the greatest gift that we can give to our society to make sure that everyone, poor or rich, are treated fairly when they're charged with a crime.
Well, tell us what a typical case would be like if somebody was charged with a crime, and I assume they have a code of crimes or not?
They have a code of crimes, very loosely written, but what would happen is police would come and arrest you. They would take you to a holding cell. In all likelihood, in a week or two, they would take you into the courtroom in a cage. Soviet system. You're in a cage when you go into the courtroom. You don't go free like we do our people. Well, not only
There's no bond.
No bond, and it's not unlikely, particularly a high-profile case, for someone to sit in jail for a year before they ever bring charges against them. I know this because I have a very good friend and others who are fighting for human rights in Azerbaijan today who is sitting in a jail for the last 3 months and probably will sit there until they decide to convict him and give them 12 years. They usually give you 12, 15 years in prison, speaking out against the government.
Is there a sentencing code which outlines how long a person can be held if convicted?
There are sentencing codes, but what they do is they look for different codes to charge you with and then pack them on. You know, reasonable people would say, well, this is the code and this is the time you're supposed to be incarcerated, so that's the problem. Well, these aren't reasonable people. These are people who are there to enforce the law for the government, no matter at what cost. So if the code says 5 years, they will come up with some way of making it 15 years. And nobody can appeal it because the government's afraid, they're afraid of the government to appeal it, or you'll go to jail.
I'm getting the feeling from the way you're describing this that a lot of the crimes charged are of a political nature. What about the run-of-the-mill burglaries and assaults and things like that?
They don't broadcast the crimes as much as we do in this country. but there are certainly common crimes committed by criminals. It's not a crime-free. But I will tell you this. When I was there, and it's kind of humorous, when I was there, I lived in the old city, which is around a wall, just like Jerusalem. And I lived in the old city, rubbed shoulders with the people, and saw how it was. And I saw that their laws were dictated depending on who was being accused. So if you're a government official, the odds are you'll get a slap. If you're somebody they want to get rid of, the odds are you're going to get a lot of years and go to prison. So I saw that. I know that to be the case. And unfortunately, it seems to be getting worse there. Because I have friends who send me messages saying the police arrested this person, arrested that person. He's been sitting in jail for 3 or 4 months, and there's no telling when he's going to be charged.
Well, I'm thinking that given your background, you were interested in finding ways to assist in possible defenses and maybe changing or at least making suggestions on how to change these things, so it might be a little more fair for the people at our charge, because some of them may be innocent.
Well, the truth of the matter is, I agree with that, and I think ideally, we would like to do that, but the truth of the matter is, because of the delicate nature of the oil and the need for the oil and the basis, my guess is government would only support those individuals up to a certain extent. My guess is, at the very least, they would deport the Americans out of the country, and the government wouldn't do much, because that oil is very important, and that base is very important. And remember, Armenia is an ally of the Soviet Union, or the Russian, I should say. Azerbaijan is our ally, so we don't want to do anything to upset them. We see similar situations all over the world with governments that perhaps are not democratic, but we support them because of the strategic importance to our bases.
Well, okay, you said the word democratic. Could Azerbaijan be considered a democratic country? There are some elections, I assume, but not too many political parties? Or?
Well, they limit the time to advertise for about 30 days prior to the election. Very rarely is there opposition, because you can't win in 30 days. And everybody knows who the government candidates are, so they win. It's very hard to beat. I'm not aware of
Is this even on the local levels?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because everything's run by central committee. So, yes.
Are the elections then generally uncontested, or is there a sham candidate to?
Both.
Okay.
They do both. I've seen both. Mostly there's nobody contesting because they know it's a waste of time. But sometimes they put somebody up knowing that he can't win.
So what, you were there for 1 year?
2 years.
2 years. What were you able to accomplish? What achievements could be made by you and other Americans in this program to assist the system?
There were approximately 5 or 6 of us, maybe a little less than that, Americans who were with the American Bar Association. And I had the criminal defense segment. One of my friends, Catherine, had the legal education, and there were others. And we worked with, she worked with the schools. I worked with defense bars as long as I could, until eventually I started gravitating more towards the judges and prosecutors. So what we were able to accomplish, I had seminars that I conducted with primarily the judges. I did some defense lawyers, but they're afraid to clap, they're afraid to say anything, they just sit there stone face because they're afraid somebody's watching them. But I worked with as many as I could, and I certainly tried to impress upon them change. I'll give you an idea. As I mentioned, if you're accused, you come to court in a cage. If you come to court accused, you're...
Let me stop you just for a second. Don't want to mess up your train of thought, but are there any crimes for which a person might be on their own recognizance or put up some bail and then come to the court by themselves?
There are a few. Certainly minor crimes they are. But anything that's criminal in nature and particularly serious, or if somebody speaks out against the government, the answer is no. They're always put in cages.
Okay. There's
also a presumption of guilty. Unlike our system, where there's a presumption of not guilty, there's a presumption of guilty in Azerbaijan. So if you're brought to the court, you're presumed guilty until you prove it otherwise. You're giving a defense lawyer who's not very well trained. And quite frankly, they're told to keep their mouth shut while the prosecutor runs a case and the judge helps out. So it's a very stacked system against the criminal defendant in Azerbaijan.
So with the burden on the person to show that they're not guilty, how do they go about doing that?
Some of them can't do it, and they're found guilty. It's very easy to find them guilty. They don't have, a lot of them don't have any money. They can't get out of jail to hire somebody. It's a very stacked system. You and I don't want to get arrested in Azerbaijan because we probably won't get out of jail.
If a person is charged and they are not able to hire anyone, do the tenets of Gideon versus Wainwright apply in Azerbaijan?
In some situations, they will provide a lawyer, yes.
Okay. And then what are they able to do other than perhaps have them testify or?
They come to court. Prosecutor brings the case. Prosecutor presents the case. The judge goes along with the prosecutor. And at the end, by the way, Mr. Defense Lawyer, is there anything you want to add?
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay.
Well, how are their cases presented? Of course, in our system, the state or the government or whatever has the burden of proof, and you said it's the opposite. All they need to do is charge someone, and then the ball's in your court. Does the government still present then a case which needs to be refuted, or is it the other way around?
No, the government presents a case, and then it's somehow the defense lawyer is given the opportunity to refute it. But in all likelihood, they don't have any ways of doing that unless they're a rich candidate or a rich defendant, in which case they could hire people, I guess. But it's so stacked against, and we're so spoiled in this country because people are presumed innocent. They have to prove it. There, it's the other way around. I will tell you, one time I was doing a seminar with judges, and I suggested, because I'm a big advocate of jurors, I trust jurors. Not that I don't trust judges, but I particularly trust jurors to decide someone's guilt or innocence.
Well, you get a mix of thoughts with 12 people.
There is. There's no question. But with me personally, I prefer trying it to a jury. So I talked to them about that, and after I got done talking, one of the judges raised his hand and said, "Mr. Gabel, why would we do that? We don't do jury trials in our country."
Okay, so there's no jury system at all.
He said, "Why would you give it to somebody who's not qualified, not trained in the law, to decide whether someone's guilty or not?" And I tried to explain, because it's a factual issue, it's not a legal issue, but it's to deaf ears. So we run into that in those countries too.
Do they have anything similar to our system where the person doesn't have to say anything, or they have no burden of proof, things like that? No. If
you decide not to talk, I guess the prosecutor can infer that you must be guilty. No, you're not defending yourself. So the answer is no. There is no constitutional protection against self-incrimination.
Well, of course, when we're picking juries for our trials, a lot of times we ask the people, prospective jurors, if they think that just because the person's been indicted or charged that they're guilty. And I think you have a similar experience, that a lot of times people do believe that if they're charged, there must be at least something to it.
Yes.
It doesn't work that way in Azerbaijan, I assume.
No, they don't. It's not a facade. I mean, they say up front, you're guilty and you have to prove innocence. You know, the presumption of innocence and the issue of indictments is something that we do ask the judges to give an instruction saying just because you're indicted doesn't mean you're guilty of anything. But, you know, it's the old story that once the horse is out of the barn, it's hard to put it back in. So when the jury hears that, they think they must be guilty of something. And the reality is, under our system, they're guilty of nothing.
In the Azerbaijani system, then, they have one judge decides the whole case?
Sometimes they have a panel of 3. Just depends on the case.
And do they have a system of criminal procedure and rules?
They do have criminal procedure, particularly in Macedonia, which I worked on that with others. But it's loosely written and interpreted by the government the way they wanted to interpret it.
You indicated that it seemed almost fruitless to work with the defense lawyers, and you spent a good deal of time in working with prosecutors and judges. What was your focus doing that, and what did you hope to accomplish, and what did you, if anything?
Well, we hope to impress upon the judges and prosecutors to be fair. There are some good prosecutors, good judges who want a fair system. They're not totally subservient to the government. But many of them are afraid to do anything that would in any way jeopardize their career, because if they do something and it gets back to the leader of the government or somebody in the government, they could find themselves out of work pretty quickly.
Or becoming a defense attorney.
Or a defense attorney, or find themselves to being a defendant, just depending, yes.
Okay. We have about 20 minutes left in the program. We're going to move on to Macedonia here in just a second. We're going to take a very short break to let you know. The sign was right behind me. You're watching You and the Law, and we're coming to you live and in color. Our telephone number is 223-5311. It's a call-in show. If you want to call in and ask Aldan Gabel, who has had some rich experiences in Azerbaijan, working within their legal systems. Al, you were 2 years in Azerbaijan, and before you have some things that were given to you. I don't know exactly what to call them. They're not mementos. Awards, perhaps? Or?
Some awards. Some were gifts given to me.
Okay.
If I could put this up.
Sure. Why don't you show it over here, and they'll zoom in on that, maybe.
Is that coming in okay?
Middle camera. Okay.
How's
Let's
that?
see if we can.
Okay. This is an emblem of the sun, which is the one that they use in Macedonia. It's similar to a logo, I guess is the best way to say. And you see this all around. It's I believe it's yellow and red, or yellow and orange. So if you go to Macedonia, we'll see this. Mike suggested and said before about Macedonia is the I'm not sure the exact word, but the real, although my Greek friends would not like this, but there's the old Macedonia, which was a part of the Yugoslavia. When it broke off, it became Macedonia independent. If you go south of the border of what's called this country of Macedonia, you go into Greece. And if you go into Greece, you will go immediately when you go across the border, which I have, you will see signs that says, "Welcome to Macedonia." And I remember the first time I did that, I scratched my head and said, how can I be in Macedonia? I just left Macedonia. There's a history of infighting between the Greeks and the Macedonians. I'm not taking sides. Obviously, it's a big fight. Macedonia, the country, has been trying to become a member of EU. Greece has vetoed it, had not allowed them to be a member of the EU. They insist that they change the name because they claim, and rightly so, the northern part of Greece is called Macedonia. So there's a battle going on between the two countries. Once in a while, they shut the borders and don't let Macedonians in. Generally, they let them in because they shoot themselves in the foot, because the Macedonians are coming to Greece because it's a beautiful country, and they're coming there to spend money as tourists. So there is that battle going on between the two. Here is an emblem I got from, I don't know if you can pick that up.
Turn it this way. Turn toward this camera.
Okay.
Okay.
Down.
And what is that?
Down this way?
No,
this one? Oh, he wants
here's
that
the
way.
red light here.
Okay.
Right over here.
He's pointing that one.
Okay, now we're
Okay. This is a plaque from the police forces who I worked with for 3 years. Rather than working with defense lawyers per se, I actually worked with the police. The police are controlled by one part of the government, and I worked with that. I actually had an office in that particular internal affairs division. And I also had a place to go at the American Embassy. I had free access to the embassy too. So this is something, when I got ready to leave, they were kind enough to give me some of these things. Here's another one. It says International Criminal Investigative Training Assistance Program, ITSITAP. That's the program I was in, funded by the United States Department of Justice. Skopje, September the 28th, 2012. When I was there, they gave this platform to me, which was real nice. Okay.
And that is a what? Show the show the plaque again. And what is that in the plaque? Is that the country
This
itself?
This is the flag and the emblem I showed you before, the color.
And an outline of the country or something?
An outline of the country. Now here
okay.
would be Greece, up here would be Serbia, over here would be Bulgaria, and over here would be Albania.
Okay.
It's landlocked, very much landlocked. I'm very proud of this because it shows, I have two of them, 2010, 2011. It shows, quite frankly, men and women who I greatly respect, the United States Marine Corps. They have a birthday every year, and they invite those at the embassy to come. When I was in Azerbaijan, I went. In Macedonia, I went, and I was fortunate enough to get some pictures. These men and women work very hard to protect the embassies all over the country, all over the world, excuse me. And they're fine young men. They are young, and they're working their best to protect our embassies. I give them a salute. And I always went to their party because I thought it was the right thing to do. Here is I'm almost the last one. Here is a group of people that I worked with in human resources in Skopje. And all those people work in human resources. They're not all people from the ITSI program. They're people from all European organizations. As you can see, there was a lot of international people in that country because Skopje in Macedonia is a very important country because you got Albania, you got Serbia. Serbia is one country in particular concerned with Serbia because the Bosnia War were the aggressor, according to most American authorities, and therefore there's concern that that country could become nationalistic and aggressive. Again, I'm not taking fights, I'm just telling you that's one of the reasons why we seem to still be in that area as a result of the Bosnia War. I will tell you also that I learned Kosovo, which is a country north of Macedonia, which also used to be a part of Serbia, but it was taken away from Serbia as a result of the Bosnia War, is very unstable. It's trying to make it. Actually, if you go into the Capitol, there's a statue. I have not seen it, but there's a statue of Bill Clinton. It was under Bill Clinton's administration that Kosovo became an independent country, but it was land taken away from Serbia. So there's a lot of friction about that. Serbia is not happy that they lost that land. So it's an interesting part of the world. A lot of wars. The Archduke was killed in Serbia, or by a Serbian. I'm not sure which country, but somewhere in that part of the world. It's a very, it can be a dangerous country because there's allies and alliances all throughout that part of the world.
Well, you spent 2 years in Azerbaijan and then returned, and you went to Macedonia after that. Was it right after that, or did you practice a little bit back here in Dayton?
Yeah, I left Azerbaijan, flew back, excuse me, and I came back. I was here approximately probably about 9 months, maybe 8 months, and before the 8 months came, I got a call from Mr. Falk, who said he was now in Macedonia and he'd like to have me come and join him. And I told him very briefly, number one, I didn't know where it was. I've heard of it. I remember studying it in the literature, and I think probably all of us have. But I didn't know where it was, so I said, give me some 24 hours to look it up and see where it is. And I did. I called him, and I checked with the judge. I had a big manslaughter case in Greene County. I had a wonderful client. I didn't want to leave her. I wouldn't leave her. So I called Mr. Falk, and I said, listen, I'll do it, but you got to wait till I finish that case, which ended up being September. So I left in September, flew to Skopje, and was met at the airport by my associates, people from Macedonia. It's a delightful country. Compared to Baku and Skopje is a lot more modern. Very easy to live in. I had a beautiful house. I had big salary compared to what those people make. It was a wonderful life, and that's why I stayed 3 years. And I also saw some changes. I worked very closely with the police and also their special task force. All, as I mentioned before, all police, not military, but all police went through the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which is where I had an office. So I had access to these people, and I worked very closely with them and did seminars and met with the minister, a lady who's from Macedonia but was studied in America. You find in a lot of these countries a lot of educated natives from the United States. They were taught here in this country, and they went back and took some of the things they learned, and as a result, their country has become somewhat better.
So what was the focus of your your work in Macedonia then? And how would you compare it to with the Azerbaijan experience?
Azerbaijan was focused on criminal defense work, and unfortunately it didn't stay that way the whole time. It did for a while, most of the time, about at least 2/3 of the time it did, but at some point it became obvious that I wouldn't get anywhere with this Collegium chief. So in Macedonia it was human resources. And the purpose of human resources was to both the hiring, the promotion, the qualifications, all sorts of things that we take for granted in the hiring of people in a professional way rather than a patronage where you hire your best friend, which is what they've done. And I did that, and in the last 4 or 5 months I worked on the criminal code, criminal defense code, which was a new one. We had used some of what we had in America. I had a copy sent to me, and we went over it, and I compared it to what they had drafted. We made some changes, and they eventually did adopt a criminal code, which was different than what they had been practicing.
What had they been doing? And this was from what year on, after the Yugoslav breakup?
Well,
late 80s?
Well, yeah, they probably used pretty much what they had in the Yugoslavia system until we came along. The Italians and others played a major part in getting that change before I even got there. But, you know, things like we talked about grand juries. We talked about indictments. We talked about the possibility of a defense lawyer having an investigator, which before exclusively the bond of the prosecutor. We talked about all sorts of improvements that we have here that they don't have there. And a lot of those were adopted. They were adopted for a reason.
Were they receptive?
They were receptive, but I'll give you my consideration or my feeling. Macedonia wants to become a member of EU. EU has European Union.
European Union.
And there's an advantage economically because that opens the market for them in Europe. But they can't get in unless they do 3, 4, 5 different things. One of those is an adopted criminal procedure code, which they did. Another of those, of course, is change their name, which they haven't done yet.
What are they going to change it to?
I think they pronounce Vadar. Vadar is the name of the river that runs through Macedonia. So the Greeks have said, call it Vadar. And they said, why should we do that? It's Macedonia. You know, it's interesting. Who's the most famous person to come out of that part of the world? Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great's from Macedonia. Now the issue, they fight over this. Which Macedonia did he come from? Did he come from where the country is, or did he come from northern Greece, which was called Macedonia? I'm not an authority on it. A little bit I've read seems to indicate he probably came from northern Greece because at that time it really wasn't a country of Macedonia. It was part of the Yugoslavia system. But they still fight over that. The airport in Skopje is called Alexander the Great. The biggest statue you have ever seen that was built when I was there is out of Alexander the Great on his horse. Huge. So they like to stick it in the side of the Greeks, and of course the Greeks say, okay, fine, you're not getting any of you then.
Well, from what you're saying then is that there may be more rights to this country of Macedonia, soon to be, or maybe later to be Vadar, than there was in Azerbaijan.
Could be. It could be. It's hard to take a side because of you know, both sides have their positions. You know, Greece.
What would the status of the rights of the individual be in Macedonia then, as compared to Azerbaijan?
The rights of the individual in Macedonia are more protected than they are in Azerbaijan. Macedonia is a government with a parliament. The conservative Christian, I believe it's conservative Christian, has won the last 3 or 4 elections. I actually participated in 2 of the elections when I was there as a member of the embassy. I watched where I was, it was very democratic. They gave them 1 ballot, they gave back 1 ballot. I didn't see any cheating. We all checked, we didn't see any cheating. I think it was a fair election, and the Christian Democrats or Christian conservatives won. So it seems to be a much better system than Azerbaijan.
The countries are pretty close together, and they're pretty darn far apart as to the rights in trials and systems and whatever. Yes?
Yes, there's no question that Macedonia is a lot more democratic in its approach than Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is run by one president, one family, and what they say goes. It's hard for us to understand that, but that's exactly what happens there.
Well, I think it's, from what you've said, it sounds like it's more like the old Soviet system with a little latitude.
Well, yeah, and I'll give you, and I mentioned this to you in the green room, the head prosecutor of Baku and I became friends because he wanted to work on his English. So I became one of his favorites. And he was a very jovial guy. He served in the Soviet military when it was the Soviet Union. He was from Siberia. So he had interesting stories about Siberia.
Let's look at the map here for just a second. Sure. Baku is a seaside
yes.
city?
Yes.
Right below the north-south symbol there, I believe. And that's where you were located?
Yes.
Okay.
It is. I traveled from Baku. I took, as you may remember, Charles Corral had a show where he could travel around. Well, I did the same thing for Baku. I talked to the director and let me do it. So we used to get in a car on a Friday, if we could. Friday is a religious holiday or day for the Muslims, so sometimes we had to leave on Saturday. But we would drive all over the country and go to different cities for the purpose of meeting with lawyers. So I met with lawyers in Ganja, which is up to the top, and I met with lawyers down in Lake Iran, which is down near the border of Iran. And I went different places, and the purpose of that, and these are little villages, you know, with hole in the floor and the ground for toilets, no toilet paper, pretty primitive actually. But yet...
They use the criminal code probably, huh?
Yeah, well, I assure you that the president's family doesn't have to live like that. So, but we did. We went around, and I thought it was well taken. I insisted on getting out. So we did that, and we did that for a while when we were in Azerbaijan. For over a year I did that. In Macedonia, I did go around a little bit, but not quite the same because it really wasn't necessary. Most of the population was in Skopje. Skopje was an easy place to live. It had coffee houses. Unemployment rate's 35%, but you never know it. People sitting around, particularly the men, are sitting around drinking coffee. Coffee's about $1, and it's delicious, and it's outside. Even in the winter, they have big heaters. You sit there. It's very relaxing. I miss it, actually. It's a very relaxing atmosphere.
Would you go back?
Only if I could. Obviously, you can imagine what this means to be away from practice. It's not easy, particularly the first one. First one, it was just expenses. This last one, I get paid rather well. So if I could, I would. I'd love to go. I would always have my dreams on going to Africa. I just got back from Israel for a visit. It's despite all the doom and gloom, it's a wonderful area to go and visit. And someday I'd like to be able to go to the West Bank and visit the Palestinians too, as well stay in the Israeli side because I'm very much allied with the Israelis.
We have a little bit less than 4 minutes in the show. What do you think your experiences have shown you as to the future of these various legal systems and how we can help? And I think ours is pretty much a model system. Might get some argument. But,
well, I went when I went to Azerbaijan first. We had an orientation in Washington, the American Bar Association, and one of the things that stuck in my mind, even though our system is by far superior to most, we don't go with the idea that you will learn from us. We go there that we can learn from them. And there are some things that they talk about that made sense. So I never go with an idea of arrogance. I go there and I always tell them, I'm here to talk about this, but I'm open to any other suggestions you've got. I think that's what we have to do as Americans. We have to encourage the training. I think we have to encourage democracy and do so hopefully through peaceful means and not through guns and weapons and missiles. It's hard to do. It's a harder way to go than wipe somebody out with weapons, but I think it's really the only way we should go.
Do you, especially in Azerbaijan, do you think that your input was welcomed by kind of an intransient system that was already there? Or are you just kind of an interesting sidelight to them?
Well, I think when I first got there, the Azeris depended on the United States for some aid, even though they were getting billions of dollars. That's no longer the case because they have lots of money in the oil. So I don't know if their tolerance would be as great as it was when I first got there. But I think, again, those of us who can should speak out. You know, I tell my friends, both pro and not pro, that Azerbaijan is a beautiful country. It's the history of the silk trade, where the people from India and others came to Europe with the cloth and the goods. And so it's a country that has tremendous history. And it could be even a greater country if the country would learn to tolerate some free speech and to work with others besides just certain people. And I know that's easy said, not easy done, but I certainly would encourage them to do that.
What do you think of the prospects? It's going to take a while.
It would take a while, and it's going to take pressure from the government. I'm not sure our government's got it right now.
Yeah. Well, it's been great having you here. I think we're running out of show.
Thank you.
Been some great experiences for you, and we appreciate you telling us about it. So we're going to wrap it up. This has been a production of You and the Law, a monthly program designed to bring Montgomery County citizens news of the legal world around them with the best and brightest minds of our legal community. I want to thank all the volunteers behind the scenes who have made this program possible, and of course thanking Aldan Gabel for a splendid performance. I don't know if it's a performance, but
Thank you.
so also want to say goodnight to Lily and Katie wherever you are. I'm your producer and host. I'm Mike Monta. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.